The head of the Munich Security Conference is with me, Christoph Heusgen. He was also the foreign policy advisor of then-Chancellor Angela Merkel. Mr. Heusgen, you've come out in favor of expanding the G7 nation group. That's the economically strongest democracies in the world. Why are you saying is now the right time?
Well, we see how other bodies expand. We see at the same time how the member states of G7, they are still very strong countries, but their relative weight, their relative economic weight is going down. And therefore, why not add to those G7 present members additional ones? Precondition has to be, and I think this is the core idea of the G7, they have to be democratic, they have to be countries that adhere to the UN Charter, they adhere also to market economy. And there I thought the G7, which has been very Europe-centric, only Japan from outside the transatlantic community, why not take other strong countries like Australia and South Korea, both established democracies, to strengthen the G7?
Now we're hearing lots of talk also amongst other bodies, the BRICS countries, or including India notably, China, Russia, they are also planning on a very significant expansion. Is this just diplomatic inside baseball, or why should people care?
Well, first of all, we do see it, but there is one difference. The G7 is really a coherent group of countries. When you look at the G20, when you look at BRICS, it's totally different. We see right now in the preparation of G20 that what happened at BRICS, where there was common view and everybody got along, now all of a sudden India and China as key players both in G20 and BRICS are go at each other's throats. So this is not working as it is it should be. Why it is important? Because of course we have the UN, and the UN has to be at the core, but there are so many international issues, so many challenges that you have to work together. And I think it's a good idea if those who have certain interests work together. But what is very important, and this should happen in daily, that the different interests come together and you find a compromise, you find solution to the huge global challenges that we face.
You've already mentioned it in Delhi, in India. We are seeing the G20 meeting over the coming days. Of course, on the agenda will be climate change as well. And this is where we see India and China no longer that terribly keen necessarily on dropping coal as an energy source. So what are the chances of actually making some headway on that major challenge of climate change?
Yes, the G20 actually is there also to prepare the COP meeting in Dubai later this year. And we see in some countries, also with economic challenges, that what they have put themselves as an objective to get out of fossil fuel, that there is some reluctance. And I think this is very concerning. I think what we really need to do is push this agenda, put it high on the agenda. We see all over the world how climate change affects the livelihood of so many people. So we cannot let down. But I'm afraid you're right. There is some reluctance to go ahead with an ambitious agenda on climate change.
Now, China's president says he won't be attending, so we don't see China there at the highest level. At the same time, China is pushing within that BRICS format of actually having a counterweight to what they perceive to be Western-dominated bodies. So talking about geostrategic developments here, what powers are we seeing at play? Yeah, it's very interesting. And when you look at this from the outside, sometimes you even laugh. I don't know if you followed what happened in Johannesburg for the when the BRICS met. The Indian president, Prime Minister Modi, first refused to step out of the plane because the South Africans didn't give him the same reception as they gave the Chinese president. You have a lot of competition, and when it comes now to the G20 in India for Modi, who is ahead of elections,
this is very important for him, for his party. And when you are in India, you see him all over the place. He wants to be, seen as the leader of the world, as a president of G20. And she doesn't like that. She wants to be in the same position. This is why he is pushing at BRICS, and to be kind of a player in Modi's game. He refused to do that. And you have to know, of course, that between India and China, while at BRICS this seems on the surface to be a good relationship, is a very difficult one. China claims Indian territory. They just put out a map where territory that I would say is clearly Indian is seen as Chinese. So they had border clashes, and with his refusal to attend, she sends a strong message, a negative one, because of course, in this meeting where you discuss climate issues, as you said, where we also talk about financial issues, we have debt crisis. We need to discuss these issues, and for Xi not to be there is negative. I'm very happy that the American president, that all the G7 leaders will attend, but it's not good that President Xi refuses to come.
Well, leaving some of the potential vanities aside, this clearly seems to be a power game at play as well.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, India right now surpassed China as the largest country population-wise. India has a stronger economic growth rate. So I think that she is worried, and so therefore he doesn't want to give Modi the additional show that he would then use to demonstrate that he is the boss and she one of the many. It's sad. We are very happy, I think, in Germany to have had somebody like Angela Merkel and now Chancellor Scholz, who don't share this vanity, but they're interested in substance.
But is this also about the West kind of losing its dominance? We heard in South Africa, for instance, the South African foreign minister say this is now the age of the global South coming. And there's a very broad definition of what the global South is. So it means not the West.
Well, first of all, when you look at the people who attend India, it will be all the G7, all the West will be there. And Russia is not coming, which is good that they are not. China is not coming. So it will be again, it will not the global South. They score an own goal there. So I think that will be the so-called West will be strong. But there is, of course, something which is very important, and this is also, by the way, something we tried to reflect at the Munich Security Conference. We have to take the concerns, the issues, the challenges that the so-called global South face more seriously. We have to talk to them on eye level. We have to see how we go into partnerships, real partnerships. But Germany is on its way. You remember last year when we had our G7 in Elmau, where the Chancellor invited several countries from the global South just to mark also that Germany goes into this direction, and we have to continue that.
And Germany is also stressing that now it is fulfilling its own commitments towards those 100 billion promised to those countries that are suffering most from climate change, while not really having been the producers of climate change. So when you say Germany, Europe, the West is taking the global South more seriously, how does that translate into concrete terms beyond that?
Well, this is a question you have to ask the government. There are these commitments, and we have to fulfill this, absolutely. But you also know we have just been having the budget discussions in the German parliament, and you'll see how this will then be put into practice. And I think we need to be clear, but as I said, the government has to respond to that the commitments we entered into, that we also follow them and implement them.
Now, when you look at all these developments we've just talked about over those shifts and changes in those bodies that have been on the international diplomatic scene for decades, what would be your top line? Is this the power struggle in the end between the United States and China, or is it much more complex than that?
Well, you can put many interpretations in it, and we are not. I cannot give you a final answer. I think we are in a healthy development, healthy insofar as we, countries like Germany, others, realize, yes, we have to invest in the global south, but we have to take it much more seriously. We have to see an eye level. We have to realize that it's not enough if we in Germany do our, reduce our CO2 emissions. This doesn't help us in the long run. We have to help the countries in the global south, and we have to engage there. We have to invest there. We have to do much more in Africa. It will be, 1/4 in a few years. 1/4 of the global population will be there with the challenges and chances. So we have to invest there much more. We have to look at them. We have to talk to them on eye level. And I see a gradual recognizing of this, and we just have to follow up.
Christoph Heusgen, head of the Munich Security Conference and former foreign policy advisor to Angela Merkel, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.